Hey everybody, Jason and John here for Everyday Crypto, sponsored by CryptoTaxShield.com. Jason, it's been a few days. I appreciate you taking some time with us today.
John, it's nice to see you as
You
always.
too, man. Um, we're going to do a fun thing today. I mean, crypto's fun. Obviously, we both love this stuff, but I want to shift gears a little bit. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world, and I'm gonna try and ride that fine line between like good information and conspiracy theory. And I want to talk about the Great Reset. Right? I know you've heard of it. We sort of tickled it a little bit in the past, but I'm like, I want to sit down with Jason, kind of see. I mean, you have such a good view of the world sort of economic landscape, and I know things are getting weird, so I thought let's sit down and talk about it a little bit.
John, that sounds very interesting for sure.
Cool, cool.
Let me start off by if you find any entertainment or educational value in this at all, please like and subscribe. It helps us help you. And we are not financial advisors, always do your own research.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is a great topic. I know me and you've talked about it off air several times. So let's get into it.
Yeah, yeah. First of all, I mean, and we'll get to the crypto sort of play with this whole thing eventually, but you start looking different parts of Europe with their interest rates going on. You look at our own nation with what's going on politically, how it's tied into our inflation rates. We had the World Economic Forum sort of thing going down the last month, where Mr. Klaus Schwab basically even called it. I think even used the term the Great Reset at one point. So, I know there's a lot of conspiracy stuff, but what are you seeing? What do you like? What's tickling your brain with this right now?
So just to give a little bit of history. I've been following this idea of a great reset since the late 90s, mid 90s, late 90s. But back then it wasn't called that.
Hmm.
There really wasn't a name for it. It was just people who saw weird things going on and projected how we get what happens 50 years down the road if we stay on this path kind of thing.
Right, right,
So yeah, for one, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's just mathematics.
right.
We're already at the level of Great Reset. So if you took all the debt in the world
Hmm.
and all the value, money, any kind of value in the world,
Right.
you couldn't pay off all the debt in the world. There's more debt than there is money. So at some point, something needs to be restructured, which would be a Great Reset. But here's what other thing people don't understand about this whole thing. So all nations have debt. It's
Right,
become the norm now to spend more than you create.
right.
And America's been really good at that. When I was like 13, I think it was going to take every American something like, what was it, like $12,000 to pay off the national debt.
Right.
And right now it's something crazy. Don't quote me on this number, but the last time I looked, it was something close to like over $300,000 per U.S. citizen.
I think you're close. Yeah. Hmm.
And the reason why that gets so out of hand is because two reasons. One, once the government knows it's unpayable, every time they run into a problem, it's just like, just print more money.
Right.
Because at this point, it's well, you can't stop. You literally cannot stop this train.
Right.
And then the interest paid on that debt.
Hmm.
We more of our tax dollars go towards servicing the debt, which is just paying the interest on the debt,
Right.
than our military, than anything else. Like I forget what the number is, but it's many billions of dollars a month that literally just gets burned in a thin air because of the interest we owe. And we're not alone. Like every country in the world is pretty much rolling this roller coaster ride if they're able to. And that's why it's not a conspiracy theory.
Right. Sure.
You're seeing signs of this. You really are.
Would,
Like, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, I just want to jump in real quick. Would you consider the sort of the impetus of this whole thing? I know we talked about a 50-year, or you mentioned a 50-year thing when we got taken off the gold standard back in the early 70s. Do you think that sort of precipitated where we are now?
That's such a good question, Paul.
John.
Oh, I'm sorry, John.
That's my middle name, though. You're close.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's all right.
So that is such an epic point in not only American history, but global history.
Hmm.
I think it was August 13th or 15th
Yeah.
of 1971 when Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard. And yes, that's where the problem starts, because back then dollars were backed by gold. So if the U.S. government wanted to print off $1 trillion to help out with the pandemic, first they would have to get their whole hands on $1 trillion worth of gold.
Right.
When you take the gold standard away, you can print off without consequence, at least not immediate consequence.
Sure.
It's not just that. Like this rabbit hole goes deep. I'm sure you know that, right? Like there's so many angles you can look at this.
Sure.
But yeah, that's when it started.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And just as a fan of history, you can almost pinpoint that as sort of the great, the big bang of this whole thing where we are now. So let me ask you this: would if we're looking at this from a 30,000-foot view, and you're right, we could go so deep, but at a 30,000-foot view, if we're all sort of worldwide in this mess, if we just started from scratch, we made it all go away. I mean, we were playing mental gymnastics here, but what would happen? Like if we all just started from scratch, we did all collectively decided to put into play reasonable things going forward. Is it a bad thing? Did your head just explode?
Yeah, no, it's such a good question. So it's a good thing if we change behaviors.
Sure.
I'll give you an example, John. By the way, my father raised me.
Mm-hmm.
He was very aware of how the introduction of credit cards into America was kind of me in your lifetime.
Sure.
Like they were very new, and then they kind of got real popular, and then it went from just Kmart and Macy's to everything's got a credit card.
Mm-hmm.
My dad would not let me get a credit card, and he preached to me about how this is going to ruin America.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very adamant about that. And so because of that, I didn't get a credit card until I was like 42 years old.
Wow.
I bought my first house cash. I've never bought a car on credit. Like I've never actually had a credit history, at least not until 42. And then I ended up buying rental properties, and I had to establish a credit. But he was right. You can follow the path of the Great Reset is right about when they started introducing credit cards into people. Mm-hmm. And just look at the life differences. So my grandfather was just a truck driver.
Mm-hmm.
He was able to raise three kids and a wife in a very nice house in a very nice town in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And the wife didn't have to work. And back then, there weren't credit cards so much.
Right.
And mortgages were usually 8 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And a mother could stay home and
right.
raise a family. But now look at your average family. Mortgages are 30 years, and they're in certain parts of the world they're going to 50 years now.
Right.
Both adults have to work in the family, and it's just restructuring the way we know life. But this is what happens when you introduce debt, not only to your government and the way it prints off money, but the way you live your life.
Right.
And we don't teach basic financial education in high school, which blows my mind. Out of all the stupid stuff we teach, we don't introduce the idea of credit cards to seniors in high school. Like, listen, this you need to look out for. Like, why is that?
Yes.
I mean, I graduated, the degree in finance, and I don't even recall us ever talking about credit cards in college.
Right.
Like, I wonder why. Is it some sort of thing? But
well, if you had 300 million people who have credit cards, pay them off every month, and don't pay interest, the credit card companies go out of business, right? So they don't want you to know. They want you to use them, but they don't want you to learn that it's really just a tool to use. And that interest is the devil, right? Like it just, it's, if you can stay away from it, do it. I live a very similar life. I mean, I had credit cards early, but I carry zero debt. I measure my need. If it's, if I'm going to use credit cards, it's usually like if I'm on vacation, so I don't have to carry a lot of cash and stuff. But I guarantee as soon as I come back, they're paid off, And along the lines of what you're just talking about in terms of debt and teaching people about debt, one of the main reasons I left the mortgage industry is 08, 09, we started doing subprime lending, and we were taking people who had bad credit to begin with because of mismanagement, and then giving them a 9.5% loan that they just couldn't afford. And I'm just like, you're making the problem worse for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. So yeah, no, I get what you're saying about a Great Reset. It's interesting to see what some of the conspiracy theorists have come up with, and actually to see that you're right. It's not a theory anymore. It's happening, and just to kind of see where it might end up.
I think the real question for me, like when I think about it, so I know it's coming. I don't know if it's coming tomorrow, if it's coming 20 years from now or 50 years from now. I know it's coming for sure.
Sure.
For me, the question is, okay, what does that look like as far as how the last years, how bad and chaotic does it have to get? Is it world wars? Is it violence on the streets? Is it chaos?
Yep.
Or is it just government sitting down and saying, hey, look, we got a problem. It needs to be addressed, and here's how we're going to do it. And they use maybe CBDCs as digital currencies to kind of reset the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the question. Is it crazy violence, or is it just all the world's governments agreeing to
Right.
somehow come together?
Well, not just even that, but what about
Yeah.
sort of civil violence, and
Yeah.
people start snapping under those conditions. And on top of that, to regain order and to begin something new, do we have to give up freedoms to get there? I mean, that seems to be a cultural thing here in the United States, worldwide too, but I'm only speaking for our country. We tend to grasp comfort at the expense of liberty sometimes, and I just wonder if that plays into this as well.
I bet you're right. We always take convenience, so and we give our liberties up so easily. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's really sad if you really look into it, and both sides of the political angle they give us stupid arguments to argue over, so they can do this kind of stuff behind our back, and
100%.
just give people an idea of what's going on and how these things unravel. Is Citibank just came out, I think it was yesterday or the day before, and they said that they believe that Europe's inflation this winter is going to be like 18%.
Yeah.
And they just printed off like a 10%, which I don't know how I can express this to people. 10% is horrendous. Like
Yep.
a healthy is like 2.5%.
Mm-hmm.
You get anywhere near 4 or 5%, that's danger zone.
Right.
18% is when economies start unraveling.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you get chaos in the street. Because at 18%, you're cutting your buying power in half every 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And those 5 years go by really fast. And this isn't just a Europe thing. Like you're seeing this. You saw this in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka collapsed so fast that most people never even heard what happened in Sri Lanka.
Right.
It happened so fast that people aren't even talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
China right now, they just decreased their interest rates, and people are scratching their heads like, well, why would they do that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's because they're a house of cards, and the biggest foundation of that house of cards is housing.
Right.
And their housing prices have gone down 11 months in a row.
Wow.
And their biggest developers are coming out and saying, look, we can't make our payments. Like, we're over leveraged and we're about to go bankrupt.
Right.
So that's why they're decreasing their interest rates, because they're trying to save the housing market. Because if that goes, everything just falls right behind it.
Crazy.
And there's even other weirder stories. Like I don't know if it was Hungary or one of these countries in like Eastern Europe. I forget which one it was. They printed off something crazy, like an inflation rate of something in the high 20s, low 30s.
Wow.
And the president decreased interest rates, and literally the whole world's like, "What just happened?" Because you just accelerated out of control inflation, which
Right.
are trying to put the brakes on it. So there are weird things going on, John,
Yeah.
that should not be ignored, that lead you to believe that the global economic monetary policy structure
Yeah.
is starting to feel the pressure of out of control inflation,
Yep.
and it's starting to show cracks.
Yes. No
Yeah.
doubt. So let's tie this back in and wrap up into where does crypto fit in this sort of this slow burn of a reset?
That's such a good question. I saw this picture the other day, and it was so perfect for this. And what it was a graph,
Mhm.
and then on this side of the graph, it had how much money has been printed off.
Right.
So it was like an accelerating curve, right?
Mm-hmm.
And on this side, you had Bitcoin.
Right.
Over time, less and less gets produced to where it gets to zero is produced. It's hard
Right.
capped.
Right.
And if you know anything about economics, it's just perfect
Yep.
graph that lets you know that, hey, look, as dollars and currencies are being printed off to oblivion, so much so that they're worthless at some point,
Mm-hmm.
you've got a hard capped asset like Bitcoin that is extremely scarce. And instead of it being printed off, it prints to zero to where it's never printed off.
Right.
Once it hits 21 million, that's a done deal. And right now,
Right.
right now you're already at 19 million. So the next 2 million are going to take like 117 years.
Mm-hmm.
So this asset is extremely scarce. It's the answer to everything. Like,
right.
As a Great Reset gets closer, what people don't realize about this, the world's governments cannot stop printing money at this point.
Right.
This is how I know that at some point, probably relatively soon, the Federal Reserve is going to stop increasing interest rates.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, they know 100% they have to turn the money machine back on.
Right.
Because if they don't, the whole thing collapses. And that's why you were telling me earlier, you were listening to some guy and he was like, hey, look, this is the new norm. High inflation is just the new norm. We're never getting back down to 2.5%. It's just not happening. And he was right.
Right.
We can hope to get as low as possible, like, maybe 4 or 5%, but
yeah,
this is the new norm. It really is.
Crazy. All right, man. I think that'll wrap it up for this one. I'm sure we'll do a rabbit hole dive another time on this and some other things. But I just thought we'd have a little bit of fun today, kind of see where it fits with crypto as a whole. So I appreciate you taking some time.
Yeah, just one more thing, John.
Of course.
This was a good one. I enjoyed it too.
Yeah.
People who, I don't know what category to put people in, but people who are aware of these types of things, and maybe they fall into the conspiracy theorists just because, like, people who prepare for the end, right? Like what do they call them? Preppers?
Preppers. Mm-hmm. Yep.
People have been seeing this coming for a long time.
Decades, yeah.
And not all those people seem to be on board with Bitcoin, which kind of shocks me because it's everything you stand for.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. No, it seems like a perfect marriage for that. So cool. Jason, thanks so much, man. We'll do another one in a couple of days and we'll hit some new topics.
John, I appreciate you as always.
You too, my friend. Take care.
You too.